The following podcast you're about to see or hear happened on the 1st of November of 2023, just over 3 weeks after the Hamas attacks in Israel. The podcast involves my good friend Khaled and a man who was introduced to me by Khaled, who lives in Israel, who lives in the West Bank, who lives in the heart of the conflict that is raging at the moment. The objective of this podcast was to create a conversation, to create a dialogue between both sides, to understand both sides, and, God willing, to come up with some solutions to the conflict that is raging on and has been raging on since the end of the Second World War in the Holy Land. There will be a lot of strong opinions in this podcast, and we talk about a range of topics. And I pray that we can come up with some solutions to this conflict. However, my logical brain tells me that it is much more complicated than that and not as easy as said than done. But regardless, I pray, whatever religion you are, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're a Jew, I pray that we find peace with one another. I pray that we can live together with one another in peace and stop the violence and stop the escalation, because I know myself, personally speaking, I'm looking at the Middle East right now in awe and with a bit of anxiety, because I know that this leads to a very dark path. I'm no stranger to war myself. I come from the former Yugoslavia, where we experienced a bloody and barbaric civil war at the beginning of the 90s. And I really don't want to see this escalate to another conflict, let alone a global conflict. So please have a listen, enjoy the podcast. If you have any comments or anything you want to share, please do it with respect and without degradation. So thank you guys. Enjoy.
Good. All right. I am ready and good.
Awesome.
Maybe just get a bit of preambles and formalities out of the way first.
Sure.
Look, I think we owe it to ourselves first and to everyone else to ensure that the intent of this discussion is to discuss the current affairs and the status quo in the motherland, or the Holy Land, as we both like to refer to it, but also maintain mutual respect and dignity for one another as humans, irrespective of our theist background and our political views and what we stand for and what we object to or reject. And I ask everyone that's participating on the live feed to please respect, conduct your questions and ask your questions, if you have any, with utmost respect and dignity. No profanity, no derogatory statements, no defamation of personal character. Andy, this is going to be a discussion without any prejudice whatsoever. There will be some discussions and some topics that may tap into some sensitive areas within our emotions and our positions. But believe you me, it does come from a source of care, love and respect, and more importantly, an educational means of, or an educational session to enhance our knowledge of our nuances, our variances, and more importantly, our similarities. And any relationship that, may have opposing views, as well as common views, is always a healthy relationship. If we all agreed and never had any opposition to one another, I don't think it's I don't think that would be a healthy relationship, because the respect and love will simply cease to manifest. So the differences does create a bit more respect, as long as they're conducted with a lot of respect and assurance that there is no change of how we feel towards one another on a humane level, irrespective of our backgrounds. Enough said from my end. I'm going to turn the aircon because I'm a little bit overwhelmed with heat here in Sydney. I don't know what the weather is like over there.
Khaled's already overheating.
Not as humid as it is in Sydney.
You reckon it's humid here?
It's always humid in Sydney, no?
I'm just testing your... Okay, perfect. We're going through all good on Facebook, guys, which is great. Your voice is coming through, Andy. Our voice is coming through all good. I want to say thank you, Andy, for coming on and having this discussion, especially at a time like this when, there's rockets flying above and, we're in this situation now where the world has their eyes peeled on the Middle East in the Holy Land. And, myself having seen some of the most awful videos I think I've ever seen in my life. And sometimes I regret watching them, but at the same time, I need to understand what's going on because it's the reality of human beings. For those who don't know, Andy, you live in Israel. Do you still live in the West Bank?
I do.
Yes. And Andy lives in the West Bank in Israel, and he's in the heart of the conflict. And he's just let us know that there might be an opportunity that he needs to quickly go if something goes down where he's at the moment. So we are conscious of that.
It isn't an opportunity.
That's right.
I may have a
It's a necessity.
I may have a rocket fired at my head, in which case I have to go to the bomb shelter.
That's the reality.
That's
yes.
Keep the phone going if that happens, Andy. So sorry for being satirical in a very serious moment, mate. It's just not right off me. But
No. So that's absolutely fine. And the bomb shelter in the building I'm in is all the way downstairs. I may not have reception, but I'll try.
Yeah.
I certainly will try.
Yeah.
I just want to respond to something that Khaled said, or maybe to everything that Khaled said. The reason that we're having this discussion at all is because of a relationship that you and I have built over, 8 years, 9 years. It's got to be something like that. And we don't believe in one another's integrity. we know we have experienced one another's integrity, and that's the fundamental. That's the reason we're able to have the conversation at all. Right? So I hate talking about this, but if there's anybody I would kind of enjoy talking about it, it's with you.
Thank you. And look, I think we had a few written exchanges where, it got to a point where there was misperception as to whether we're fighting or not, but I didn't see it that way. One thing I will say to everyone is, I know for a fact that if I and Andy were to ever be in a position of leadership, Israeli Arab leadership, or leadership of Israeli Arab communities, I know for a fact
that war would really come to an end.
Yeah, the conflict will come to an end. I know there'll be no innocent lives hurt. And the only thing that will be thrown are staplers and hole punches at one another, but nothing at anyone else. Would you agree with that statement, Andy?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more.
No. So
actually, one second, can I cut in? And
sure.
Can I just? I'm not going to say what I was going to say. That's actually a really good place to start the discussion. I think, if I could be so bold.
Go ahead.
Because there is something about this conflict that drives people almost like, when I say crazy, I mean almost clinically, right? In other words, people lose the ability to discuss things rationally and according to, with logical, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of a phrase in Hebrew, with logical progressions and argumentation and evidence. Those things suddenly go out the window. And that was a lot of in fact, I think that was all of the And, well, let me say it differently. And for that reason, I think that more than anything else is what makes this subject so incredibly difficult to talk about. People have a tough time talking about this topic with their head. People talk about this topic not even with the heart; they talk about it with the gut. Right? People know what they feel and will adapt anything they hear, see, anything else to fit that reality, and that makes the discussion very difficult.
I agree, for sure.
Look, yeah, you're 100% right. And this is where I think it's the way the discussion ends up being, which is via a gun barrel or a rocket launcher, is wrong. But prior to that, before getting to trying to discuss the topic using ammunition, I think there's also one more flaw that, and I'm sure you disagree with me on this, is that the discussion that the Israeli regime would want to have and always want to have is more of a monologue rather than a dialogue. You must agree to everything that I say, rather than let's sit down and have an amicable discussion where we can have a dialogue to understand what the issues are, resolve the issues, lose some rights while gaining other rights, and end up being on the outcome being fruitful for both sides rather than single-sided. This is where, a lot of people don't see that much of what the Israeli regime, be it the current or the previous ones, and I'll ask you about the Prime Minister that was elected prior to BiBi. I don't know what happened to that right-wing nut job. Pardon me for saying it this way, and excuse my French, but one shit out, another shit in. I don't know how the other guy would have behaved. He probably would have behaved a whole lot worse than the current guy, seeing his extreme right-wing views and well-publicized hatred for the Arab and specifically the Muslim world. But anyway, put that aside. BiBi is known to only want to have his way and no other way. And I think President Trump, the former US president, through one of the many meetings that he had between himself, BiBi, and the Palestinian president at that time, tried to have some sort of resolution, and President Trump said, when he was referring to the Palestinian president, he said, this guy's come with a hat and an open mind and wanting to resolve issues and agree to stuff. Whereas when he was referring to BiBi, and BiBi was standing only 1.5 meters to the right-hand side, he said, this guy's not happy with anything I'm saying and proposing. And it doesn't look like he's going to agree to anything. And that's always been the case. It's always been the case that the Israeli regime want to have a monologue, and it's their way or no way. And the world is waking up to that. Fortunately, the world is waking up to that, and they're seeing the problems, and they're seeing where the problems are stemming from. Now, I'm not by any way, shape or form condoning some of the reactions, but I'm more so highlighting that one of the root causes is the people on the other side not wanting to listen with their ears, but rather listen with their mouth and put a demanding approach to their allegedly peaceful talks.
So, thanks. I appreciate all that. It will surprise you to hear that I don't disagree with everything you said. In fact, I don't disagree with everything you said. The disagreements I have are strong. but I don't disagree with a lot of what you said. And more than that, I think it's a problem. I mean, a big problem. Yes, Israelis let me say it differently. Everybody in this region, and I mean everybody, wants to talk and nobody wants to listen. That is absolutely true. It's true for Israel, it's true for the Palestinians, and it's true for everybody else in the Middle East. But I don't have a responsibility for the Palestinians or the Jordanians or the Egyptians or anybody else. I have a responsibility for myself and my country. And, that's a large part of why I founded a company to teach kids how to debate, right? I want them to listen to arguments, and I want them to respond to the arguments they hear, and I want them to know that there's no I want them to respond to the things they hear and not the things that they think or they think they heard. I want them to respond clearly because I want them to listen. And listening is an active project. It is an active process, right? So on that point, I think you are absolutely right. The psychology of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The psychology is such that both Israel and the Palestinians speak in ways that produce that reaction on the other side, right? Palestinian media, Palestinian personalities, they speak in a way about Jews, about Israelis, in ways that just close our ears. And we do the same thing, right? I'm not drawing an equivalence, right? I'm not drawing an equivalence, and I don't want to get into, some sort of mathematical comparison about, you did these 50 things and you did these. It's not a question of numbers. But yeah,
it is a question of time, though, not necessarily numbers, but it is a question of time, and time is the biggest factor in the status quo.
I'm not sure I follow you. Can you say it again?
Okay, so why are we where? Well, why is the situation is where it is right now? All right. If you look at what aviations do when there is an incident is they follow a process that they call a taproot analysis.
Yeah.
And through the process of the taproot analysis, they get to ask a minimum of 5 whys, and by the time you get to the 5th why, you really get down to the bottom end of the main root cause of why the situation is as dire as it is right now. And one of the things of the root cause is the time, the duration, the generations, the multiple generations of what they've experienced, from infants to adolescents to young adults to seniors to death, and the next generation coming up and seeing what they're seeing and experiencing what they're experiencing. You've got 75-year-old men now that were born into the conflict. 75-year-old humans born into the conflict. They have experienced nothing other than the conflict. And this is where time is the biggest factor that drove the situation to where it is right now. So it's not about numbers, you're right. It is about time. And it's about, well, what have both sides have done to try and ease the pain, diminish the problem, and walk around or walk side by side, hand in hand, and lead the way to a peaceful state. And yes, I agree with you. Both sides haven't done a great job. Have done no justice for anyone. but it is a question of time.
Okay, so let me take that. I'm glad you mentioned that. In the 75 years of Israel's independence, we've built a country. We've built industry. We've built agriculture. We've been, there is no metric except on this one that Israel has been successful, and I would even argue that on this metric, Israel has been as successful as it has been able to be, given the situation in which we live, given the reality in which the country was born into and has survived with. I will point out that 75-year-old Israeli men and women were also born into conflict, and somehow do not find themselves in the position that Palestinians do. And I've got to ask why. I also, even more than that, I read on Facebook today. I'm not going to look for it, but someone said something. Yes, the Holocaust was a terrible crime, and it was the worst crime in history. And this is the second. This is the second version of that. So it's not a comment I'm even going to. It's not a comment that I have any intention of dignifying with a response. What I will say is that, okay, but I'm not going to respond to that, and I'm not going to take it seriously. And if that's what you believe, and I don't mean you, right? If that's what a person believes, I don't have anything to talk about. I want to know honest question, do you feel that the position of Palestinians today is the same or worse as the situation for Jews in 1945?
So, firstly, there's a lot to unpack in what you've said. Let me just answer some or respond to some of the comments that you made. Firstly, you said, in 75 years, you've built the country. That's like saying prior to occupying the land, that there was no country there, or the people that were living there are living in primitive means, that there was no culture, there was no economy, there was no finance, there was not a prosperous regime and a prosperous community. I beg to differ on that, and I beg to differ quite strongly on that, because Palestine existed prior to the 75 years, and it was a fruitful economy. It flourished. There was Muslims, Christians, and Palestinian Jews prior to the occupancy of Palestine. So that's first thing. Second thing, the Holocaust is an atrocious crime, and it tarnished humanity, and it will continue to tarnish humanity as well. It is not the worst crime, though. There's far worse than it. King Leopold of Belgium managed to kill around 20 million Africans, but no one seems to want to talk about that. They only want to talk about the Holocaust being the worst crime in the world. Well, when you multiply the number of victims of the Holocaust by 3 under one leader, it makes the other guy look a little bit more problematic than Leopold. To me, as far as I'm concerned, I know for a fact both are resting in hell forever, and I hope and pray that humanity never ever experiences anyone like them. The current situation, no way in the world is it as bad as the Holocaust, but that does not mean that it's wrong, the current situation.
I understand.
It's not to say, whoever said that comment to you that, the Holocaust is the worst crime in humanity and this is leading to it. No way, it's not leading to it.
The person said, the comment was that it's already at that stage.
No, it's not. It hasn't gotten that bad. but that doesn't play on the severity or affect the severity of the situation. That doesn't make it less digestible or more digestible and more, okay, we can comprehend the situation a little bit better now. No, not at all. One soul to me, one lost innocent soul to me, is as though, the entire humanity has been killed. And it's a verse in the Quran that, you should not kill one single person. The death of one innocent person is equal to the death of humanity. So you're right. I'll go back to your comment. It's not about numbers. You're right. It's not about numbers. It's not about 20 million. It's not about 6.5 million. It's not about 9,000 fucking people in a span of 3 weeks. No, it's not. It's one person dead. That's enough for me to say, this is not right. Get your head out of your ass and do something about it. You've had almost 100 years of it. Where we are right now, you have done absolutely nothing other than add to the problem rather than find a solution to the problem.
So I cannot adequately, I don't have words to describe the extent of my shock that there is a crime, that there's a claim to be made that the Shoah was anything but a unique, singular moment in human history that stands apart from anything else. And it stands apart from anything else, and there is nothing else before or since that is in the same universe as to be compared to the Shoah. So I'm not even gonna, and that, like, to take your point, Khaled, that doesn't mean that Leopold wasn't an appalling criminal. That doesn't mean that American, before the 20th century, right, or even into the 20th century, it's not a comment on American policy towards the native population in North America. It's not a comment on anything. Yes, there have been horrible crimes against humanity for millennia. More often than not, they have been directed at Jews. So I'm not going to respond to that at all, other than to say that I'm not going to respond to that at all. But even more than that, not even. But you didn't answer my question. I asked if the Palestinian position today, the status or the conditions in which Palestinians live today, is that worse, as bad or worse, or not as bad as the situation was for Jews in 1945?
I'm only 50 years old and I was born in 1974, so I can only go by what was written in textbooks, historical textbooks, about the situation of the European Jews back during the World War II. And I would say, based on what I read, the Jewish community, the European Jewish community, was a flourishing community. It was there was a lot of rich people then, and they controlled or managed a lot of banks, jewelry stores, diamond exchanges, lived in supportive communities of one another. And what drove that guy to do what he did? There are some takes that you don't want to hear, and I don't want to mention because I don't want to upset you. I know how you feel about the situation, and believe you me, I share the same sentiments. But I will say, you definitely did not live with water restrictions. You did not live with aid restrictions. You did not live with food restrictions. You did not live with where you can and can't go. Your house wasn't being raided almost every second night for the sake of embedding fear into their family and kids. You did not live every minute of the day wondering whether your father's coming home or your brother's coming home or your mother is going to get raped and shot in the head, or whether you're going to see your sister or not, or whether she's going to be, mutilated by a group of thugs wearing green. You did not live through those conditions prior to what he did, because there is no textbook, no article that actually shows that. What the people of Palestine are living through right now is years and years and years of oppression. Everyone says it's an open air prison. Well, it's far worse than that. At least in an open air prison, you're fed and you're given water to drink and you're given some alone time and you're given some exercise to do. But when you're living and your safety is looked after by the wardens and by the guards. But when the wardens and the guards kill your families willy-nilly just for the sake of not looking right, when someone walks into your mosque with a machine gun and shoots 46 people for no good reason whatsoever other than them practicing their faith in a place of worship, when the news comes to you at the end of the day that you're not going to see your father anymore because he's been shot in the head, when the news comes to you that your mother went to buy your groceries and produce so she can cook a meal, and guess what? She is 6 feet under. No, you didn't live through those conditions. The Palestinians are living through those conditions right now and have been living through those conditions for years and years and years.
So I'll repeat that you haven't. Are the Palestinians, is the situation in which Palestinians live today at the same as or worse than the situation of Am Yisrael?
Well, without me spelling it, I think I answered the question in that no, the Palestinians now are living in a worse condition than what the Jews did back in 1940s.
So
I didn't say in those words, but I think my response was fairly clear.
I wanted you to say. I wanted you to say.
I'm sorry?
He wanted you to say
I
that.
wanted
Okay, right. Well, there you go. They're living in worse conditions. This is what I can see now in correlation to what I could read in an era where I wasn't alive.
What have you read?
The 1940s.
What have you read about it?
What have I just told you before what I read about it. I'm only going by historical records.
No, I mean what books or what? That's what I don't mean what things did you find out?
Oh, I really can't quote the books and articles and references that I've read, but please, if my
Khaled, what's the difference between these two? What's the difference between these two mistakes?
What's the difference between these two mistakes?
Yes. You see it?
There isn't. They're both wrong.
No, there's a very important difference. In the first one, what's wrong with the first one? If I put a 2 and a numeral 2, and I put another numeral 2 together, do I not get 22?
No, because of the symbol that's in between.
So I've read the sentence wrong. I thought it said, give me a numeral 2 and another numeral 2, and that combines for 22. That would be right, except Andy, you've read the sentence wrong. You've read the equation. That's not what it meant. It meant give me 2 things and give me another 2 things, and now you've got 4.
Who wrote the question?
I did.
Well, you wrote it wrong.
Hang on, I didn't finish. Okay. The problem there is one of interpretation. In theory, you're right, but your mistake is that you read something incorrectly. The second example is just incorrect, right? regardless of how it identifies or regardless of how it makes you feel or anything else, right? There is no universe in which 2 + 2 equals 461.7. There is no way to read that and for that sentence to be correct, okay? So what I'm talking about now is virtually every single word that you just said, and I can only say this to you because we have been so close for so many years. Every single word that you just said is false.
It is
false.
False, okay.
It's not false. It is not a misinterpretation. It is demonstrably, every single word is demonstrably false, okay? When we complete this discussion, you and I are going to have we'll have a little Holocaust education because it is clear to me that you don't know what it was. And I'm not going to discuss it right now, but it's clear to me you don't know what happened. And it is clear to me that you know that you know just as little about the history of Israel and Palestine. And what I mean by that is again, I can say this because we've known each other for a long time. You know full well that I am not a mouthpiece, right? You know full well that I am not a mouthpiece, certainly not for Bibi Netanyahu, and certainly not for the notion that Israel has never made a mistake, has never done anything wrong. That's not where I come from, and it's not what I'm saying now. And listen, on any metric, on any scale, no matter how you build it, any sober and honest analysis, you go number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, any sober analysis of this 100-year conflict will leave Israel miles on the with the moral upper frame on any metric. It kind of goes back to something I said before. Excuse me, I'm gonna get my gotta plug my phone in 1 second. I gotta plug my phone in just a sec. Sorry. I gotta plug my phone in just a sec. Sorry, 1 second.
Andy, there's a lot of feedback coming through from you.
Yeah, no, all of a sudden because I was on my computer.
Ah, okay.
Because I had the Facebook Live on my computer,
Okay.
and it just suddenly popped in. You know, I was kind of expecting this conversation to begin. The thing I expected to be the first minute in the conversation was for Christian to say, "So, Andy, how you doing this morning?" Right? And the answer to that question is, I'm exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted. I'm not exhausted. Not only that I'm exhausted because I'm worried about my son who lives in Tel Aviv, who runs back and forth to the bomb shelter, but I'm exhausted because I'm exhausted by a world that has just become Orwellian. I'm exhausted by having to state that white is not black and black is not white, and I'm exhausted by the fact that what's that?
And it never will be.
What do you mean? Oh, that white will never be black and black will never be white.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm exhausted by having to state that at all, and I'm even more exhausted. One second, let me finish.
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm exhausted by having to state that at all, and I'm even more exhausted that cogent, logical, rational arguments that proving and showing that white is black and black is white is just it's an impossible case to make because of the very first thing I said, which is nobody's listening, right? Nobody's listening. We live in a conflict in which people know what they feel and don't bother me with the facts. That's right. Another thing, this wasn't something that someone had said. This was something that I saw this morning on Facebook. Someone wrote something about the long history of Muslims welcoming Jews with open arms into the Holy Land, and incited Salah ad-Din, incited other areas. I don't know the history. I don't know that area of history well enough to respond to that. But I do. But the person said, when Jews were persecuted in Europe, Muslims in the Holy Land welcomed them with open arms. Right? Again, it's not my opinion that is not the fact. It is just not factual. Right? The Palestinian leadership, the Arab leadership in the Levant in the 1940s was very close to that man in Germany and actively supported that man in Germany. Right? The reason the British, who ruled the Holy Land at the time, would not allow Jewish refugees from Auschwitz to come into the land of Israel was because of Arab pressure not to allow them. Okay, and I mean that not to discuss the correctness or not correctness of that. That's just fact. I mean that was presented, and it's now fact. So we live in an Orwellian, right? Black is white. This is what happened. Well, no, it isn't, right? The Arabs, and I don't mean to get into the Arabs did this and we did this. That's not what I mean. I mean just basic fact. The fact of the matter is, I'm wearing a white shirt, right? There's no way to say I'm wearing an orange shirt, but someone's going to come along and say I'm wearing an orange shirt, and that's going to become fact. So the whole discussion has just lost any tie it has with facts, right? Truth is false. So that's what I was going to say. And as far as the notion that Palestinians today, or the Palestinians in 1945, were somehow worse than the conditions for European Jews in 1945 is such a ridiculous claim.
No. You're see, now you're being Jewish and you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Right.
Khaled, how about leave comments like that for our personal relationship?
Understand. So the reference I made in the 1940s was prior to the crime and the genocide being committed against the Jewish community.
Sure, the crime began in 1939. It began in 1937, if you want to say like
that. Prior to that.
Yeah.
And I said clearly, what drove that madman to do what he did is unbeknown to me. I have no sound knowledge of it. But there is no reason that justifies his actions. Let me be clear about that. There is no reason that justifies and condones it.
No, and you didn't say anything.
What I said is the situation of the Palestinian people for the last 75 to 100 years is worse off, much worse than what the situation was for the Jews prior. And I was very clear, and you can wind back the video, prior to the actions being taken.
That's fine.
I didn't correlate the status quo with the crime and the genocide being against the Jewish community, the European Jews. No, I agree with you. That crime is heinous on any measuring scale.
So you didn't suggest for 1/80th of a second other than anything other than what you just said, right? You didn't say anything that would have suggested anything else.
So where was I wrong then?
But that's not the question I asked. The question I asked was, is the situation of the Palestinians in 1945 worse than the Jews' situation in 1945? That was the question. And I don't want to keep battering the question, but I do want to say the following thing, and this is going to lead to something else, to something else that I was going to bring up. Sorry, what's the sun's in my eyes? And that is the reason that Israel looks the way it does today and Palestine looks the way it does today is because Israel meaning the people of Israel, the Jewish nation. We got to 1945 and said, okay, how do we rebuild? And there are very few instances, if there are any, I'm not sure, of people kind of playing the victim. Jews did not play the victim because it's just not in our DNA. That's, in fact, and if you want to, we'll talk about Zionism in a minute, but the DNA of Zionism, in all its forms, and there are many, is that, is our situation here in Russia, Belarus, White Russia, Hungary, Germany, wherever. Our situation here in Europe, Western Europe, is terrible. We can plan, we can dream, plan, work hard, and achieve something. Now, we can argue, and we will argue until we both meet in Jannah. But that mindset is what I'm talking about. And we can talk about the outcome and good or bad and about the theory, but it's a mindset that mindset is why we have the country we have today. And that mindset the mindset of victimhood is the reason the Palestinian population lives in the conditions it does today. The last thing I'm going to make on this point is that if you go count like anti-clockwise, if you start in, let's say, Jaffa, Ramla, Lod, if you start there and go eastward, right, and go anti-clockwise, so the conditions and the situation in which Palestinians live gets progressively worse, right? So whatever that situation is in Jaffa and Lod and Ramla, Haifa, it gets worse in Yehuda and Shomron, in Judea and Samaria. It gets, right, let's say, whatever the situation is in Jaffa, let's take 20 off of that when we get to the West Bank. Or let's take 10 off it when we get to the West Bank, and then we take another 50 off when we get to Jordan, and then we take another 75 off that when we get to Syria. And by the time we get to Lebanon, there's nothing to talk about. Well, I don't know.
No, you live there.
No. I understand that. Whose fault might it be? In other words, you've got Palestinians you've got children and grandchildren. I'm sorry, you've got grandchildren, grandparents, parents, children, and now another generation who have been born into refugee camps in Lebanon. What's that got to do with Israel?
Well, it's got everything to do with Israel. It's got everything to do with American and European settlers coming in, stealing homes from Palestinian people, native people that have lived in that household, in that area, in that village for aeons. And someone decides I'm Jewish, I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Israeli, I'm Jewish, but I have the right to go and occupy a piece of land to oust.
Okay.
Hang on, I allowed you to talk. Please let me talk. I am given the God-given right to fly over to Palestine and Israel, select the house that I want because I want to live in this village, I want to live in this house. I don't give two shits worth about who is actually living there. I am a settler, even though, and you oust that people out of their home and you send them off to you call it a refugee camp, I call it a concentration camp, and the whole world agrees with me. Somehow Israel doesn't see it that way. But you're given the right to leave your country, to come and migrate and live in Israel, at the turmoil of the people that own that land, own that house, and have been living there for generations. So, yes, it is your Zionist ideology's fault that the Arabs are living in the condition that they are. It's not the Palestinians' fault. It's not the Jordanian fault. It's not the Syrian fault. It's not the Lebanese fault. It's not the Iraqi or the Syrian fault. It is purely the Zionist movement's fault. Because you asked me this question a few weeks ago. Do I feel like I have the right? Hang on, please, Andy.
No. I'm going to the bathroom.
No.
Shut up. I have to go to the bathroom for a
All
second.
right,
I'll be back in.
Go. When you come back, I'm going to continue.
Was that true?
What?
What you just said just then?
Absolutely. 100% true.
They can go to any Palestinian's home and declare it as their
Theirs. Absolutely.
And this all started, was that the Balfour Declaration? Is that what it's
The
called?
Balfour Declaration has given a small proportion of Jews sanctity in Palestine. The Palestinian people welcomed these Jews with open arms. As the Moorish Empire governed the Andalus for 680 years, where the Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity lived together and prospered together. But then the Zionist movement grew, and every Jew around the world feels the right to actually go and live in the Holy Land. Now, holy to the Jews, holy to the Christians, holy to the Muslims. Absolutely, it is holy. So, as I was saying, yes, the condition of the Arabs, the condition of the Palestinians is as atrocious as it is right now, purely because of the Zionist ideology and philosophy and what has been implemented. Now, you asked me a few weeks ago, do I feel like, as a Muslim, don't I feel the right that I can just go and live in Saudi Arabia because of it being a largely Islamic country? And I said, absolutely not whatsoever. I don't have any rights whatsoever to go and kick a Saudi out of his home, a Christian Saudi out of his home, because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is largely Islamic and it has the two holiest sites in the Islamic faith. No, I don't have that right. I am Syrian and was born in Lebanon, so I identify as Lebanese as well. I have Jewish lineage, but that doesn't give me any right whatsoever to go and occupy someone else's house in Palestine because I have Jewish lineage. And it doesn't give me any right whatsoever to go and occupy someone's houses in Indonesia or Malaysia because of my Islamic faith. No, that is utterly wrong. And the whole premise of the Zionist movement is if you're a Jew, European Jew or American Jew, you have the right to go and settle in Israel because it's your God-given right in the Torah. Now, it is the Zionist fault, not the Arabs' fault. One question I have for you, Andy, is what does the Torah say about killing and stealing and oppressing people?
You know the answer to that as well as I do.
Yeah? It's 100% forbidden. As it does in Islam, as it does in Christianity as well. And you can read a whole lot of verses that says, I think it's the 13th commandment in the book of Exodus. I think it's chapter 13, verse number 9. Thou shalt not kill another soul in the Old Testament.
Yes.
So, and I've said this to you before, I've never seen ISIS as a criminal thuggish group that represents Islam in any way, shape or form. And any person that joins that demonic cult is nothing but a Satan worshipper. The Crusade are in no way, shape or form a reflection or a derivative of the Christian faith. Neither are the KKK. And anyone that doesn't follow the first principles and the commands of the Torah are in no way, shape or form representative or have the right to even refer to themselves as a Jew. I think Judaism is a great faith. Christianity is a great faith. Islam is a great faith. Those three faiths stem from Father Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the common text between these three Abrahamic faiths is, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not oppress. And anyone that involves themselves and breaks those three.
I'm listening to every word. I'm listening to every word. I'm just looking for I'm looking for the question that I asked you.
Anyone that involves and conducts actions that are outside of the guidelines of the three sacred texts, unfortunately do not fall under the category of being part of those three Abrahamic faiths. So, and I've said this to you numerous times, the principle of Zionism is completely and utterly outside of Judaism, as is ISIS being un-Islamic, as is the KKK and the Crusade being un-Christian-like. Because what has been conducted and inflicted on the Palestinian people is anything other than what the Torah and the Talmud teach us to follow. So it's not the Arabs' fault. It's not the Arab leaders' fault. Where the Arab leaders become part of the problem is their unwillingness to put a thinking cap on, listen with their ears and not their mouth. And that problem stems to your leaders as well.
The conversation about Zionism is a red herring. It is nothing but a red herring, and I'll illustrate that. You just talked a lot about Zionism, right? About what the goals are and what right? You tell me, can you tell me some of the Zionist, there we are. Can you tell me some of the Zionist writers and thinkers that you've read? Can you tell me any of who they are?
How is that any relevant to what is actually being written about the Zionist movement, which Theodore Herzl himself wrote about, and Ben Golam, I think it's Ben Golam, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and what they written about what the purpose and the principles of the Zionist movement. And I think I need to read anyone else's texts other than the two main instigators of the Zionist movement. Am I right in stating those names or not?
Yeah, I didn't hear the second name, Herzl for sure. But who was the second person you mentioned?
Ben Golam?
Not Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion?
He looks like Santa Claus.
What's his name, Mama?
Ben.
I can't think of who you're talking about. I can't think of who you're talking about.
Yeah, that's him, Ben Gurion.
Oh, Ben Gurion. So yeah, that's Ben Gurion. So the reason I was confused is because Ben Gurion was writing 1904. He was 24. He really started writing 20 years after that, but that's insignificant. The reason it's red hair, yes, studying Herzl and studying Ben Gurion is an excellent introduction to Zionism. There is no way to say that they are two of the most important Zionist voices there are, or there were, right? Without question. We're not going to do it now because it's pointless. But I would be interested to see the passages that you refer to from each. But that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to the point. I will.
Andy, can I jump in for a second? I know I've been
please
quiet
do.
for a lot, but I've heard this
I
term.
don't think you've said one word.
Hey, I'm listening, right? You're saying no one's listening. I'm listening. I'm willing to listen because I am not...
No, I see that. Come on. Yeah, nice.
This term Zionism, I don't think I completely understand it. From what I think, and it's probably wrong, is that like a separate fact of Judaism, or is it something completely different?
Well, Khaled already told you, or you want to listen from me?
Listen from Andy.
I would like to hear from you, Andy, please.
So, I cannot tell you how thankful I am for that question. I am so thankful that you just asked that question, okay? Zionism is a cultural... let me say it like this. There are several different strains of thought in Zionism. There's cultural Zionism, there's political Zionism, there's literary Zionism. The biggest I'm just thinking of a Hebrew word, 1 second. The biggest engine driving Zionism in the late 1800s was, well, it was what I said before, and that is our situation here and wherever is terrible, and we can work hard to make it better. But the second critical piece is that Israel had in many ways withered away over the centuries, and as the 19th century was, it was a time of cultural renewal. It was a time, right? And so several of the most important poets, let's say, of the late 19th century were Zionist poets. Several of the important novels in the 20th century have been written by Zionist authors. The international jazz scene today, but not only today, would not be the same if it didn't have Zionist musicians, and same for the classical music world, and same for the world of composition. So right, Rav Kook, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cohen Cook, who was really the first theologian to express the ideas of Zionism in religious terms. Let me say it like that. Rabbi Kook writes extensively about Jewish renewal, about a return. Right, Rav Kook says that over the centuries of diaspora, that the physical side of our nation kind of withered away because we lived in the study halls. We lived in, we did not live in, we didn't have a strongly physical side of the nation. He says, working the land by being farmers and everything else, that has a national value. The biggest reason I reject what Khaled said about Zionism, and there are many reasons, but the biggest of them is whatever happened, right? Whatever happened subsequently, Zionism was not and has never been a movement to steal or oppress or anything else. It is a theology and ideology of rebirth, of taking responsibility for our own future and building that future. Whatever we can argue after that about the implementation of that. We can argue about that, but you can't argue that that's a goal of Zionism, and you can't argue that that's a goal of Zionism.
It's a repercussion.
So Okay,
the
fine. You can
result.
say you can fine. You can say it's a repercussion, but you cannot say that it's a driving force of Zionism. That suddenly we Am Yisrael decided one fine day, let's go get the Arabs, right?
I never said
right?
go get the Arabs, but you're going to go get the land. And as a result of getting the land, you are getting the Arabs. I don't think the objective is to get the Arabs.
Okay, so
But
that was not clear. That was not clear from your statement.
Is getting the Arabs.
And that wasn't clear from what you said before. Again, there are objective facts to bear, right? And I think facts are important, right? To the best of my knowledge, which may or may not be extensive, but I think I know a lot about this particular topic. To the best of my knowledge, no Arab property in Eretz Israel. Wait a second, hang on. 1 second, hang on, I'm sorry. Oh, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Oh, no.
What's wrong?
Where's the... No. Thank God. Oh, no. Whatever. One of my teachers died. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. I'm sorry to hear. So let me just say...
I'm sorry
Let me just say... Yeah. So let me just say, in memory of Rabbi Farber, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, Rabbi Farber was one of the most astounding people I've had the privilege to learn with and learn from. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of the Talmud, and he had an encyclopedic knowledge of several commentaries on the Talmud that were astounding, and he so generously passed them on to me and generations of students. And he was a very big influence on my life. He was a very big influence on my life, and his memory is certainly a blessing to me and to my children, and Bezrat Hashem to all of Am Yisrael. He was a special.
I'm sure that is the case, and I pass on my deepest condolences.
As do I.
Okay, yes. But however, I want to say that when I saw a message come in that said, "It's with deep regret we have to inform the passing of," my heart stopped.
Of course.
Not that it was a 95-year-old man, but anyway. Yeah. So to the best of my knowledge, and again, I can be proven wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. To the best of my knowledge, the first Jewish assumption of Palestinian property was in 1948. And here I will be as even as I can. Okay, it happened after the War of Independence began on May the 15th, 1948. Okay, so it happened in the context of a war that was declared on Israel. It was, and it didn't happen until after the war had ended and Israel took whatever policy decisions it took. But that's neither here nor there. I want to ask you, Khaled, I want to ask you a question, and then there's a follow-up question. Is there any way that your mind would be changed about this issue?
You're talking about what issue?
I'm talking about the whole thing. Okay, very good point. Is there anything that would change your view that Israel is the root cause of most of or all of the suffering in the Arab in the Levant, in the Middle East?
I never said the root cause. You're the main cause, but not the root cause.
Okay. Is there any body of evidence or logical argument that could potentially alter that view?
Absolutely not, because I'm only going by the facts of what I could see and what I've studied and what I've read and what my own father has taught me ever since he had been part of the PLO and been with pride, Yasser Arafat's right-hand man for a little while. So It comes from personal experience. It comes from seeing the man himself, and it comes from listening to my father, Allah yarhamu, who has taught me a lot about the movement and a lot about what he's seen in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Nothing can be said that would alter my mind, because I can only see and go by the facts, and within Judaism itself, the ultra-Orthodox actually speak quite illfully of the Zionist movement, and speak that the Zionist movement is in no way, shape or form a religious movement that represents the great Judaic faith. So no, nothing can be said or done that would alter my mind, no.
Okay, so then I'm going to politely suggest that there's no real discussion happening.
Well,
right? In other words,
I think there is, because we don't have to agree.
No, that's not what I said. We do not have to agree. And I assume that we will never agree on this. And and as you know, I don't have to agree.
That's right.
I don't have to agree with you to love you like a brother. It's got nothing to do with it.
Yep.
But if we're talking about, if we're talking about an issue, and if there's no set of facts that could alter your view, then it's not really a discussion, is it? Right? Yeah. It's not right. It's not really a discussion. This is the way I see it, and this is the way I see it, and we go home and the end.
No, I see the discussion quite advantageous in that what you say is only more drive to actually factualize my belief and my position on it. And I'm sure the case is with you, that your position on it is never going to change. It's not the Zionist movement's fault. And what I say and how I feel and what I do say only drives your position stronger to your belief. So it's a discussion that I see that our differences is only emphasizing our position a whole lot more, because nothing that I will say will change your perception and your position. Nothing ever will, I think. And same as with you, nothing that you can present me or say to me would ever change my position, because it's not only me that's feeling that way, it's Jewish people that feel that way the same way as I do.
So I can only speak for myself.
Yeah.
Only speak for myself. But I'll quote Richard Dawkins, right?
The great atheist.
I enjoy the fact of having an Orthodox Israeli settler and a Salafi Muslim quoting
an atheist,
the most famous atheist in the world. I enjoy the irony of that. But he said,
fascinating
when I'm presented,
human he is.
What's that?
A fascinating human.
He most certainly is that. So, but he said to someone once, I can't remember what the question was, but he said to the lady, he said, well, when I'm presented with new facts, I change my mind. I change my mind, ma'am. What do you do? It is true that I believe with every fiber, with every cell in my body, that the Zionist movement is a just movement. I believe that the Zionist movement, without qualification, I think that the Zionist movement has created overwhelming benefit. Ironically, well, I don't want to say that, but it has created a phenomenal benefit for a lot of the world. But I'll back up those claims. I will back up those claims, like I said before, on any metric. I will defend that position on any metric, at any time, to anybody, right? But if you can present me with something to show me how I'm wrong, then I'll accept that I'm wrong. I'll accept that I'm wrong, and I will change my view. So
mate, when you're getting $3.8 billion a year from the US, you better do something right to the world.
Khaled, Palestinians get per capita more foreign aid than any group on earth.
Yes,
okay?
absolutely. But it's under your control. You determine when it goes in and when it doesn't go in.
To the degree that that's true, that's the correct policy. And to the degree that that's true, it is the correct policy. All you need to see is the rockets that are flying, right? I wanted to say, you were saying something as well. I'm sorry. You asked a question when we had our aborted podcast when it didn't work out on last week.
Oh yeah, about
Right?
Hamas and why didn't BiBi abolish them beforehand?
No, not that question.
Okay.
You said that you asked a question. When young Australian Jews go off to fight in Sahel, in the IDF,
Yep.
right? So they will come back, and if anything, they will be celebrated by Australian authorities as being courageous young men and women, et cetera, et cetera.
Heroic.
And you said heroic. And you said if you were to go off to fight with Hezbollah or Hamas, you would correctly be detained immediately. And correctly so. Correctly so. So I want to answer the question.
Hang on, whoa. So it's correct for me to get branded as a terrorist, but Avi Yemeni to be branded as a hero?
I'm not talking about any individual. I'm
giving an example.
So I don't know what Avi Yemeni. I mean, I know of him. I know of him, and I know his. I know him. I know of him, and I know his family a little bit. So I'll say it differently. Okay. If you had participated in entering a home, and killing the people in the home, yes, you would be correctly branded a terrorist, and that is absolutely correct. And I don't see another way to argue that point. But that was actually the more minor point, right? I mean, after this conversation, I'm not so surprised, but I'm very surprised that. Whatever. I'm surprised you could make the. I'm surprised you could make the. I'm surprised you could make that comparison, right? There is no comparison to be made between Sahel and Hamas. There is no comparison to be made between Sahel and Hezbollah. Whatever the Israeli army is or is not, the notion that it could be compared to either of those groups is just silly. But that's a let's say more. That's the less important thing. My answer that I wanted to make. The more substantive issue that I wanted to say. The more substantive response I wanted to say is countries don't have allies; they have interests. Right? That's rule number one in foreign affairs, foreign policy. And so the correct question to ask is why do Western governments view service in the IDF as being legitimate or even heroic, and view service as, for lack of a better word, with Hezbollah or with Hamas as being fundamentally illegitimate? And to rephrase the question, what interests are at play that lead to the approach to the IDF soldier, and what interests are at play at what leads to what interests are at play vis-a-vis the Hezbollah and Hamas?
I'm not following your question. I'm sorry, bro.
No, it's. I could state it as a question, or I could state it as a statement. The reason the government of Australia and the reason the governments of Australia and England and many other countries view service in the IDF as legitimate or even heroic is because there's a fundamental difference because there are fundamental differences between the organizations that you cited, because the interests of those countries are, because Israel meets interests that in these countries that the Palestinian world doesn't. And that's why, right? I wanted to go back to something you said earlier. When you were talking about, Israel Zionism is responsible for most of the misery in the Middle East. I think that was what you said. So is Israel responsible? No, I'm not even going to answer that. Even if that were true, right? And let's be clear, I do not accept the premise for 1 millisecond. But even if it were true, even if it were true, are there other cases in the world in which refugee status is granted from generation to generation to generation? It seems to me that the argument of Israel should pack up, and I'm not sure what the end of that statement is, but it seems to me that the end of that, it seems to me that the end of that would be that Israeli Jews who have lived here for 4 generations, 5 generations, 6 generations, should go back to Cairo and reclaim the homes that they were evicted from in 1954? Should they go back to Iraq and reclaim the homes they were evicted from in 1941? Morocco, right? Tunisia, Algeria, I'm less sure about, right? Syria.
Why are you only quoting Arab countries? I mean, why don't you
Poland?
Exactly? Poland, Austria, Hungary,
Fine.
America,
Yes.
Britain,
Yes.
Canada.
The Senate
right?
The Senate is that.
Keep going.
Well, not. Yeah. I'm fully
Don't
aware.
quote the Arab world, because if you look at the percentage of Jews in the Arab world that have migrated to Israel or Palestine, it's fairly minor, right? Unfortunately.
Whoa. Time out. What are you talking about?
So I'm talking about the population of the Arab Jews versus the population of the European Jews that have migrated to Palestine.
Yeah, where do you get that figure?
Well, I get it from Syria. I get it from the Syrian popular standards. I get it from the Iraqi popular standards. I get it from the Egyptian popular standards, and I get it from the Jordanian and the Iranian popular standards. The number of immigrants or migrants or refugees from those Arab world to Palestine or Israel compared to the number of European Jews that have migrated from Europe and American Jews that have left their homes and left their countries to go and settle in in Israel, including Australian Jews that have gone to settle in Israel, is by proportion, the European, American and Australian Jews are much more than the Arab Jews that have migrated to Israel/Palestine.
This isn't an opinion, right?
It's not at all. It's not an opinion. It's statistics.
This is just numbers.
Yep. Real numbers.
Yeah, your numbers are off by multiples of I don't know what, right?
Okay.
Right. I mentioned the Arab countries because because you've made a distinction in a whole conversation between European, you focused quite a lot on European Jews, when it was very, very far from the truth that European Jews were even the bulk of Jews who have settled in the land of Israel since, let's say, 1940. And the overwhelming percentage of Jews to settle in the land of Israel post 1940 came from the Arab world. And they did not immigrate, Khaled, to the Arab world. Look up Farhud, Baghdad, 1941. Okay? Right? The Farhud in Baghdad took place 7 years before the state of Israel was created, before we declared independence. And I could go on, but the vast majority. I'm just going to throw out a number. It's not an accurate number, but it's something like, right? It's something like 70% or more of the Israeli population. Certainly in 1960, it's certainly true that 70% or more of the Israeli population in 1960 had come from the Arab world. Today, it's going to be something like that. That Israelis alive today either came from the Arab world or their parents and grandparents came from the Arab world, right? My Egyptian friends, who, if they're not, I don't think they're listening at the moment, but I'll share this with them. They'll tell you their stories. They'll tell you the stories of their parents and the quote unquote immigration, their quote unquote immigration to Israel. They did not immigrate. They were forced out of their homes. They were forced out of their home. And so I don't want to leave it simply in the area of European Jews, right? I actually don't think it's significant, because you can either say that Jews from Morocco had the right or not the right to live in the land of Israel or not. But Morocco said yeah, and so did Egypt, and so did Syria, and so did Iraq. And they said that by killing and kicking out their Jews. Right? I agree with you, Khaled.
I don't remember seeing any Syrian Jews who, my dad's grandmother was a proud Jew, right, from Bab Tuma.
I thought it was more recent than that. Wait, I thought it was your grandmother.
No. My dad's grandmother.
Your dad's grandmother.
Right?
Yeah.
She lived and died a proud Jew. My uncles, my mum's brothers, for years and years and years, under my own time when I was growing up and going to Syria and visiting my uncles, they dealt with no one in Bab Tuma other than Jewish people from Bab Tuma. And that souk, or that what they call like a shopping center, in where they dealt with copper ornaments, was all the tradespeople there were Syrian Jews, and they're still there, and they still live there with a lot dignified and respected. So they haven't been ousted or killed or shot at or denigrated by any way, shape, or form.
So
your friend's family may have been subjected to some of that, to what you've said. They've been ousted, but one family is not a representation of every other Jewish family.
So Khaled, if every single one of my debaters, every single one of my Year 7 debaters would jump and say, anecdotes aren't evidence. and if they didn't, I would, if they didn't say that, I would have, if they didn't hear an anecdotal argument, if they didn't say that, I'd check them. I'd kill them. They would certainly hear about it. I don't know the accuracy or the not accuracy of what you said.
Well, I want to hear your accuracy in flagging every single Egyptian family that has been ousted from Egypt, just based on the experience of a single family experience that are friends of yours. I mean, let me be one of your student debaters and give me the anecdotal evidence of the entire country.
That's fine. In Egypt, in Egypt in 1948, there were 75,000 Egyptian Jews.
All right.
Today, Today, that number is somewhere between 10 and 20.
Right. And that's over 70 years?
It was like that. It was like that. I mean,
so you're telling me 50,000 people in 1948 left? No, it would have been a whole lot less. Because you're comparing the population from 1948 to the current population.
I'm not sure the point. I'm not sure the point that you're.
Well, you're giving me the population in 1948 versus the population nowadays. That doesn't mean 50,000 migrated in 1948.
No, it does not. It does not mean that on. It does not mean on.
How many people were forced to leave Egypt out of the 75,000 Jews, Egyptian Jews?
Said it. So I don't. One second. I don't want to throw out numbers. I don't want to throw out numbers because I don't have accurate numbers to throw out. Okay.
So what your reference to that is not really valid then. You can't tell me how many Jews were ousted from Egypt in 1948. All you gave me is what the population was in 1948. That doesn't tell me anything about how many were kicked out.
Okay. 1 second.
I do have one question for you from one of the viewers on my live feed. Can I?
I will certainly take it in a moment.
All right.
I will certainly take it in a moment. Whatever. There were multiple expulsions of Egyptian Jews in very, very large numbers.
I don't doubt that for a second, Akhi. Like I said, I don't doubt that for a second. I just, from what I've read and what I've researched, from a populist statistics point of view, the number of Jews that have been ousted from the Arab countries compared to the number of Jews that have unforcefully and willingly left their homeland, European and American homeland and Australian homeland, to go and live in Israel because it is a firm belief in the Torah that Jews should migrate to the Holy Land to build the Temple Mount so that the Messiah can return. That's my problem. You are not being persecuted as you were in the 1940s. There is no need for your continued settlement in the Holy Land, which is only meaning the population of the Palestinian people, which are natives, but not only natives, because, and I've always said to you this, Akhi, I think Jews in Palestine have the right to exist, just not different nationalities of the Jewish people around the world. Now, your reference is the Torah. That's fine, no problem whatsoever.
I haven't referenced the Torah once. I have not said one word about the Torah. You're the one who said it time and again. I haven't said one word about it.
Our previous discussions have alluded to that, right? That's what I'm talking about.
That's impossible. Yeah. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely because I don't base my belief in I don't argue according to the Torah in. I don't argue the justice of Israel, the justice of Zionism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't argue it based on the Torah. I feel it, but I don't. It's never been part of my argument about it.
Okay, so what's your justification for the constant settlement?
What, for Israeli policy now?
Yeah. Well,
wait, one second. In your view, settlement means any home built by or for a Jewish family in the land of Israel is a settlement.
If you're not Palestinian, if you're not a Palestinian Jew, what's the point? Why do you still? Do you agree that every single organization, be it Amnesty, be it the UNCF, be it the UN itself, and every other country, even Big Papa, the US, not always said that the settlement is a breach of the conventions and the human rights, but almost everyone has said the settlements are illegal. But yet it still happens.
Okay, so
What's your justification for that?
my justification for ignoring the UN?
For ignoring everyone, not just the
Okay.
UN.
Okay. Oh, would you agree that the UN has an obsession with Israel that it doesn't have for any other country on earth?
Habibi, with all due respect, don't answer my question with a question. I just asked you a question, please give me an answer.
Okay, the question is, how do I justify ignoring all that body of international opinion?
That have all agreed and said on numerous occasions that the settlements
Yeah.
are illegal.
Yeah, I have no fealty to those organizations at all. I have no fealty to those organizations at all. Those very same organizations would have very little to say Hamas were Palestinians to cross a border fence and slaughter 1,400 people. They would have very little to say. And they would have even less to say about Israel taking moves to prevent that from happening. In fact, when Israel takes moves to prevent that from happening, Israel is the target for their criticism. So I'm not at all. One second. I'm not at all concerned. I'm not at all concerned about them. If you want to talk about the legality of Israel in Judea and Samaria, so that's a he said she said argument. Your lawyers will say what you say, and my lawyers will say what I say, and let them fight it out, and they're not going to come to agreement. But that's not what I am. That's not really relevant. What's relevant is, by your definition, a family that's lived here for 5 generations, right? The great-great-grandparents or whatever, a family of European Jews of some whatever who immigrated to Israel in 1905, right? So the family's lived in Israel for 120 years. That family also you're going to that's a settlement house as well, according to your definition, is it not?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So then the discussion's not about Judea and Samaria. The discussion is, can Jews build homes in the land of Israel at all? And that you're going to have to say, as well as that doesn't just go for Jews of European descent. It goes for Jews of Egyptian descent and Moroccan descent and Iraqi descent, etc. So go ahead. I want to take the question that one of the listeners was going to pose.
Still haven't answered my question about the justification, though. It's all right. We'll have it for another session.
Fine. The justification, we can have it for another session.
Let me ask you the question from this viewer, and I think it's valid, right?
What?
I think it's a valid question. So, and I'm going to read this question word for word. I don't know how late I am to this, but I want to ask if it has been asked or elsewhere. But I'd like his views, as in your views, on the Israeli intelligence. If the Israeli intelligence identified Hamas to be hiding in Israel, would they seek them out individually so as to not endanger and kill civilians, or mimic what they're doing in Palestine?
That is a great question.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a great question. That is a super legitimate question.
Because there is an analogy that I'll give after you answer this question.
Fine. I'll certainly answer the question. And the simple answer is, I don't know. The simple answer is, I don't know. And the best I could do would be to have a guess. The only evidence I can cite, how's that, is from 2021, I think, right, when Israeli citizens, right, Arab Israeli citizens, took to arms against Jewish Israelis, right, in their homes and whatever. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been wholesale destruction. There hasn't been wholesale destruction in Lod or Ramla or Haifa Haifa was quiet, but right in the triangle, whatever. So I can't answer a hypothetical, but the only evidence that I can cite is that.
So is that a yes or a no?
That is, I can't answer a theoretical, so I don't know. It's a very good question.
All right, so
it's a very good. I don't know.
Let me give you this analogy. Analogy. If a group of hijackers, go ahead.
No. I just mean 10 more minutes, and then I got to go.
Okay, no problem.
We've just been at this for ages. We've been 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah, 2 hours.
If a group of hijackers enter a building and take hostages, the occupants of the building as hostages, does that give the police authority, at any point, does that give the police authority, the police or any authority, the right to demolish a whole building for the sake of getting those terrorists out, the hijackers out, and as a result of the consequence, all the occupants within that building, the hostages, would be under the rubble and say, yep, we got these hijackers, job well done? Or would they think about it more strategically and say, let's plan and execute a plan that would get these hijackers and maintain the safety of these hostages?
That is also an excellent question. It's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked. To answer the question, I need a little bit of background. I need some follow-up questions.
The worst hijackers you could ever think about.
I understand. Is this a one-off, or is this an ongoing problem?
No. So
in other words,
it's a hypothetical. Would you?
No, I understand.
Would you?
Your hypothetical.
Would you?
In your hypothetical, has this been going on for a long time, or is it a one-off? And the second thing I want to know is, is it a one-off, or has it been going on for a long time? And the second thing I want to know is, are rockets while they're holding the hostages, are rockets being fired out of the home or out of the building at civilian communities?
Take it whichever way you want.
Well, and if you take it, if it's a one-off, if it's a one-off hostage situation of a type that was like, Waco, Texas, 30 years ago or whatever, then the answer is obvious, that you plan and you try to extract the hostages with as little collateral damage as possible. If the terrorists have been holding hostages for decades and using those hostages as human shields in order to fire rockets at a civilian population, then there's no question at all that you go ahead and bring down the building. And there's no question.
Okay.
The Talmud says like this, right? And you're right. You quoted the Ten Commandments, right? You quoted the Ten Commandments before, thou shalt not murder. And that's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. The Talmud also says, if someone is coming to kill you, rise up and kill him first.
And that's exactly what the Quran says.
I know that.
Right.
I know that. That's why I don't understand your position.
Well, you don't understand my position because when I am growing up, not knowing whether my father is coming back home, and not knowing whether my mum is going to be shot in the head, and not knowing whether my sister is going to be raped or not and shot in the head, then I will have you for lunch before you fucking have me for dinner. That's the reason.
Fantastic. Can you cite another conflict on Earth in which people who are oppressed, and I'm not forget about Palestine, I'm not blanketly accepting the word oppressed, but is there another situation on Earth in which a group of oppressed people feel that it's justified to undertake an attack of the type of October the 7th? Is there any other case on Earth? Is there any other story on Earth? I agree.
I am not going to justify the acts of the 7th of October. But what I will say...
I don't understand why.
Because it's not right. It's not right to justify it. It's barbaric. If that's what you want to hear from me. The acts of 7th of October are barbaric. But I will ask you, what is the reason for it?
The reason for it is because they hate Jews.
No,
I don't say that.
No. It's got nothing to do with Judaism, hating Judaism or anything. It's nothing to do with being anti-Semitic. You know, a Semite is someone that speaks Hebrew or Arabic. So you can't call someone that hates Jews as an anti-Semite, especially if they're a fucking Arabic background person, because they're a Semite themselves. It's got nothing to do with hating Jews. It's all to do with being oppressed for 75 years.
Okay.
It's barbaric, 100%. But 75 years of oppression is also far more barbaric than killing 1,400 people. Also, killing 9,000 people in a span of 3 weeks is extremely barbaric.
I want to...
Carper bombing a whole strip of country is extremely barbaric. And if your justification that Hamas is there, then what is your reason for the West Bank?
So, time out. I want to address Hamas first. Hamas covenant, the covenant of the Islamic resistance movement. Introduction, paragraph 5. This covenant of the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, clarifies its picture, reveals its identity, outlines its stand, blah, 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 blah. Our struggle against the Jews is very great and very serious. It needs all sincere efforts. It is a step, right? It is but one squadron that should be supported by more and more squadrons from this vast Arab and Islamic world. It does not use the word Palestinian, but we'll leave that for a second. Until the enemy is vanquished and Allah's victory is realized. Hamas has... Am I reading correctly?
This is a very similar rhetoric to what BiBi said about the Arabs that sympathize with Hamas. And let me just add, Hamas is a child that was created by the Israeli regime to defeat the PLO, and now it got out of control, and now Israel is saying, holy fuck, we got someone that is actually causing us problems, and your prime minister and the previous prime ministers have failed to do anything about it. So your failures, yet again, are causing and putting you in the position that you're in right now. And that's it's more ego-driven than anything else.
So, if the discussion is about Israel's policy of propping up Hamas in order to weaken the Palestinian Authority,
which it did, Hamas served its purpose, which is weaken the PLO.
It has done that for 40 years. We supported the creation of Hamas in 1988 in order to weaken the PLO.
Yep.
And our dear and esteemed Prime Minister, who I don't have to tell you, let's just say I'm not a fan, right? He is going to find himself on the day after, and quite possibly sooner, on a very, very, very hot seat here for a policy of propping up Hamas and then looking around on the 7th of October and saying like, oh shit, yeah, I have no sympathy for that policy whatsoever, okay? But I do mean to say that it's just not intellectually honest to say that Hamas is a liberation organization. It is.
I didn't say that. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Absolutely. So, I agree 100%.
But it's a terrorist organization only to kill Jews.
But so is the Israeli government and the IDF, sorry.
So, again, I don't think, well, you said earlier that there's no evidence that I'm going to present to you that's going to change your view. Mm-hmm. So I won't. So I won't. I do have to go. I will look forward to doing this again. Christian, I'm sorry we didn't hear from you at all, because you must certainly have had questions.
I love this boy.
I wanted to just stay silent and just hear what you guys had to say, hear your arguments, because again, I am not very malinformed. I'm not informed enough as to the history, as to what has happened, because obviously there's decades, if not centuries, of history in that region. And like I said previously before, when we couldn't actually do the podcast, Andy, that the world's eyes are glued as to what's happening there right now, because there is a big possibility that if World War III does begin, it's going to start in the Middle East where it is right now, and it's going to get out of control. So
I hope not.
I pray that it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I have a gut feeling that it won't happen, because I think cooler heads will prevail. But
logic will prevail for sure.
Yes, and I pray for peace, and I don't know if it's possible for the state of Israel or Palestine in the future where Jews, Christians, and Muslims can all live together in a secular state in peace.
It's happened before, and it can happen again. We just have to have the right people in the right positions on the right chairs that actually implement that. It can happen. I have.
So let me respond, Khaled. I wish I shared your optimism, but what you're talking about is generations and generations of people on both sides who let me say it differently. You're talking about.
It's not an overnight solution.
You're talking about a reality that in the very best case scenario will take decades. Once you've got the right people, as you say, running the show, it will take decades to undo the damage. And you can say it's Israel's fault. You can say it's the Palestinians' fault. I'm not going to get into that. But the damage that has been done, not today and not yesterday and not on.
The way I see it, if it took a century to get to where we are now, then it's going to take at least a century to undo everything. So I am hopeful. I am optimistic. I think social media is really serving its purpose in that it's waking up the people. And as people are waking up, they are seeing the positives and the negatives from both sides. And I think the people are waking up as to what type of leader they should be electing. And if that momentum or that child can find its feet and not only and get up from crawling to walking and then from walking to running, I am very, very hopeful that we will get there. It's not an overnight solution. It is a minimum, a century before we get there. But I think we'll eventually get there.
2100?
Maybe.
And this is going to be my last comment. I really do have to go. But I wanted to address your point, Christian, about World War III. I don't know what World War III means or looks like or anything else. What I do know is the following: that I am at least as concerned for the safety of my relatives and friends in Melbourne and Sydney and New York and London and basically everywhere who have been under sustained attack. I mean, really for years, but there is no place on earth today that Jews are safe. And Khaled, I would ask you to consider the role that social media plays in that reality. Okay, I would ask you to consider the role that social media plays in that reality. It's not theoretical. It's not theoretical. Okay, every Jewish school in the world, including in Sydney, right? When Muslims shout "Gas the Jews" at the Sydney Opera House, then yeah, we kind of take that seriously. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But also, when a gunman walks into the mosque and shoots 46 people or 47 people and says "death to the Muslims," yeah, that's unacceptable as well. But I find it extremely disturbing that one side of the status quo is happily uttered and condemned, and yet the other side is directly and purposely forgotten about and not wanting to be mentioned whatsoever.
So that's an alternative reality that I don't recognize. But
hang on, did it happen or didn't it happen?
Baruch Goldstein?
Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely did.
So what alternative reality is that you don't wish to recognize?
The following reality. When Baruch Goldstein committed his terror attack, when Baruch Goldstein murdered in cold blood 39 people in Marat Machpelah in the Ibrahimi Mosque, on a Friday of Ramadan, which happened to be our Purim holiday on the same day.
Yep.
When he did that, it would be difficult for me to describe the degree of horror that gripped this country. He was killed, thankfully. He was killed, and it was a wake-up call, at least at the time, that we got a problem here that we need to deal with. Now, that's 30 years ago. This February will be 30 years. The reaction in Israeli society was one of, the whole society was stunned and appalled that we could possibly be that Baruch Goldstein somehow came out of us was the most obscene thought we could possibly have. Okay? On the evening of October the 7th, all around Palestine, and I mean Palestine, let's call it Greater Palestine, the Galilee and whatever, there were very large-scale celebrations of the heroic attack on the Gaza periphery. So I think that kind of so that's what I mean. But the parallel reality that I refer to is the notion that Palestinians / Arabs are singled out for attack / victimhood on the international stage, right? In other words, at Cornell University, and this is just one incident that I have at the tip of my fingers, but Cornell University in upstate New York, they closed the kosher dining hall and they asked Jewish residents to take their mezuzahs off their doors because they could not guarantee the safety of Jewish students on campus. And that's true at Monash University, and there's some parallel to that that's true at Monash University and at Melbourne University and et cetera, and at the University of California and every other university in the West. And so when I ask, I hope politely, and I know very, very strongly, when I ask you to please consider the impact that social media has and the impact that straw man arguments have in real terms, that it's a very real concern. and I'm not blowing smoke, and I'm not thinking about, the simple reality is, and I'm not talking about Israel and Palestine here. The simple reality is life is dangerous for Jews in Sydney and in Melbourne and in Perth and in every other Western capital. That is not the case.
Yeah, not only Jews. My wife now, as you know, is in England, right? She's staying. She's staying in a hotel in Manchester, right? The hotel, the name escapes me, but
doesn't matter.
There were on multiple occasions, multiple Jewish families have passed her, and because my wife wears the scarf, they threw profanity at her. So you're not the only victim here.
I recognize that, and I don't think I have to explain to you my feelings about that.
All right? You're not the only victim here. My
Well,
wife smiled at her to say hello, and she was
Khaled.
called a pig.
Good. And do you want me to express my disgust at that?
No, because it's not going to fix things. All I'm saying is
what I'm saying is
there's
I don't want to say
terror
no.
to both sides of it.
Yeah,
There's
Khaled.
victims to both sides of it. It's not one
I
way.
know that. I'm never suggested anything to the contrary. What I am suggesting is that as horrible as that incident was with Ula, I don't believe she was ever in danger of being harmed. Was it awful? Yes. Were her feelings hurt? Without question. I don't believe she was ever in danger of being harmed. That is not the case for Jews today. That is not the case for Jews today.
I'm not saying she was ever in danger of being physically harmed. But
So
don't go think that every single Muslim is out there looking for a Jew to slap them or slaughter them or right? It's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is no one should be exposed to hate. No one should be exposed to crime. No one should be exposed to violence.
I'm not suggesting, and I'm not interested in who's the bigger victim competition. I'm not interested in that in any way. The only thing I'm saying is that please bear in mind the very real consequences of discussing this topic in the way that it is too commonly discussed on social media. That's all. Anyway, you guys, I have got to go. Oh my God, 3:30. Christian, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Do you prefer Chris or Christian?
Sorry?
Do you prefer Chris or Christian?
Whatever is easier. Chris, Christian, Kicks, whatever you like.
Kicks, KIKZ.
Nice. Amo, I love you, man.
Love you too, bro.
I know. I'll speak to you soon.
Take care.
Stay safe, Andy. All the best.
Thanks. All the best.
Bye bye.
Ciao.